Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Test, Learn, Grow podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the top 5 things we are focused on when it comes to e-commerce marketing this year. And we arrived at these 5 things by all the conversations we have with our clients, the things they're asking us about, the things they're asking us to test, and the things that our team is actively curious about, all made it into this list. Helping me to talk about all these things, I've got some high-powered guests today from the e-commerce team. We've got Jess Kuhn, our team lead of e-commerce, and Abby Young, media manager 3 on the e-commerce team. So thank you both so much for joining me today.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you.
Miles.
I'm excited.
So I'm going to briefly give the folks listening or watching an overview of those topics, and then we'll dive in. So we're going to talk about the ever-changing e-commerce platform landscape. We're going to talk about consideration stage, audience segmentation, and messaging. Small tweaks that we can make to product feeds that can make a huge difference. Daily management and weekly reporting are still essential, and we're going to find out why. And then we're going to talk about why it's important to know your audience, know how they change throughout the year when it comes to your marketing strategy. So let's start back at the beginning with the ever-changing e-commerce platform landscape. I feel like, Abby, that could be insert vertical here platform landscape, right? It's all changing no matter what industry we're in. But when we think about e-commerce specifically, what resonates most with you? Like what's been the biggest changes? What are the biggest changes that you're navigating this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Hitting the nail on the head with insert vertical here. You know, it used to be the golden hour. Now it's the golden minute, but I don't even think it's that anymore, which applies more so to news, but also to marketing. But for e-commerce specifically, there is a lot going on, to say the least. There are tracking changes happening. There are new platforms emerging, some platforms demerging, if you will. And overall, you just kind of got to stay on the top of your toes and be ready to pivot and move and know where you should move to. So staying up to date could not be more important right now, especially, with the different news cycles happening. But a few things that we've seen and been working on in the past year or so has been Performance Max has been our biggest adaptation that we've had to make as automated smart shopping campaigns got transitioned over mid to late last year. We have learned a lot of tips and tricks along the way. It hasn't always been easy, but I think we're at a pretty good spot now. We've also seen different tracking challenges. We've talked about this in the past, but it's still very relevant when it comes to iOS changes in Facebook. And then we've also been able to test a lot of emerging platforms, such as TikTok, which is a really exciting platform. We've got some really cool targeting capabilities there and different kind of segmentation you can do. And then other types of display platforms like Criteo, which is a display platform that can show your products on different websites. So it's kind of like the display portion of what smart shopping kind of used to be, where it was showing products, but you can just focus on that ad type specifically. So there's a lot going on. And that doesn't mean you have to test into every single one, but if you're not testing into one of them or another one that I may not have mentioned, you might want to reevaluate because it's not going to work forever.
Yeah, totally heard there. I'm curious from your seat on the media side of things, of all these things that you're testing, is anything emerging this early in the year as like a new standard that's come out of all the changing landscapes? Or is there, if that's not the case, a learning that you're really excited about as you're testing new things?
Yeah, so one of the things more so later last year as the holidays rolled around, we really started using dynamic display more in our strategy. So shopping ads on websites essentially. And that really helped supplement some of the different placements we didn't have as much control over with Performance Max and allowed us to make sure we were covering those products in any manner that we could. We saw a lot of incremental revenue come through there. And Criteo is one platform that does it, but there are others. And that's the one that we have had the most fun with, and have kind of helped supplement performance with to an extent. But another one that TikTok has been talked about for a while, but it continues to show itself as one of the next big things. We're still testing into all of the different capabilities it has, but so far we're seeing some, at the very least, really efficient costs coming out of it. So as we continue to learn how it kind of the algorithm works and how TikTok is going to keep changing its algorithm, we're excited to see where that leads.
I think going back to the dynamic display, I don't think Abby gives herself enough credit, because the reason that we started looking into platforms like Criteo and going more into dynamic display is because of the change of PMAX. We had to get a little more scrappy with how we were going to fill the gap. When we're talking to prospective clients right now, I think PMAX is the number one thing that they're bringing up, because they see this big dip in their metrics in the middle of last year. And it's at the time when standard shopping started to go away and PMAX started to come into the picture. And over the last 6 months, we've really kind of cracked the code on ways to fill the gap. One of them is dynamic display is one thing we added to fill the gap. And then figuring out how to balance PMAX campaigns and still using some standard shopping campaigns to at least bring performance back to where it was before. But that's a huge thing that we've been talking about lately.
Yeah, it's a bit like stone soup. You kind of keep adding ingredients in until you get back to what you were kind of seeing or what you could expect before the transition. And Performance Max is continuing to change as well. Google's releasing a bunch of new features in the upcoming weeks. They just released negative, I believe, search terms that you could add at a overall account basis, but there's some more things to use to tweak. So we'll definitely be testing those out as they come. But in general, we have found kind of a tried and true things to do and things not to do for Performance Max, which is nice because we really had no basis to start off of.
Yeah, that's a really good point about TikTok too. Definitely advice would be, if you tried it last year and you decided it didn't work, definitely try it again this year, because it has changed so much. Because if you say that it was messy and it didn't work last year, we definitely would have agreed with you, because it was so difficult to even set up an account because the platform wasn't intuitive yet. They hadn't made any tweaks yet, but a year later, it's a lot easier to use, and we're able to see much better performance out of it as they add more and more features.
Yeah, and we've seen them also beef up their support as well, at least on our end, to where we can, if we are struggling and trying to set something up, there's at least a little bit more access to help, which is always what you want when you're about to spend a bunch of money in a new platform.
You guys, that was a heck of a tease, by the way. I feel like we just had 2 more podcast episodes scheduled with what you just laid out in that first segment, specifically about PMAX and what to do because of it or instead of it, right? So we're going to have to circle back to the two of you for another episode. You could probably talk for 60 minutes on just that, would be my bet.
Yeah.
But we're saying we're testing a lot. And Jess, I'm going to come to you because you're also our testing subject matter expert at Level, in addition to being the team lead over at Ecommerce. And I know one thing that you're testing quite often across multiple clients with success is consideration stage audience segmentation and the messaging that goes along with that. So I think that's going to layer into a little bit of what you guys just laid the groundwork with when it comes to these different ad formats and the channels they're showing up on and how we're talking to the people on the other end of those ads. So could you share a bit of that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our messaging strategies have always followed, the things we learn in marketing classes or courses. There's people that obviously have never heard of you before, people that have heard of you before but haven't done anything about it yet. And then there's repeat customers that you want to stay loyal to your brand. And we've found with a lot of brands that there's been too much clumping together of those people that are repeat customers and the people that know your brand but haven't interacted with. We see a lot of people making that one big group when they should really be two separate groups. And so the messaging changes so much when you think about the people that know your brand and haven't done something about it yet, because you have to introduce them to more value props. There's a reason they haven't converted yet, so there might be some obstacles that you have to overcome. You might just have to remind them of the brand. Maybe they had a bad website experience. Maybe their dog started barking, like some stuff you don't have control over, and maybe they just need to be reminded. But that's so different than how you're going to talk to somebody that has bought before and you just want them to buy again. So we've seen a lot of success with making sure that we treat those two groups very, very differently.
Can you share an example of that success?
Oh, that is a good
Talking about it
question.
broadly, and I know you've shared in some of our all company meetings, like specific results that clients have had. And I remember them being just very striking. It was like a huge difference.
Yeah. We have a luxury apparel brand, and the audience segmentation has to be very specific there because it's a special group of people that really wants to invest in their wardrobe. And so Abby and the team do an amazing job with research and testing different audiences. And for that, repeat purchasing messaging for somebody that's already bought that luxury apparel, we mainly talk about new arrivals, like new things that they haven't seen before, making sure that those past customers know that there's new and exciting products on the product list. But for consideration, they might just need to be reminded and convinced of the quality, that their investment is going to be worth it. Repeat purchasers already know that their investment is worth it because they've experienced the awesome product, but price might have scared somebody away, and we might have to reinforce like the quality, really go into the specifics of what those buttons are made out of and the, brass zippers and the whatever stitching. And you don't have to go into that much detail in that regard with somebody that has worn that piece before.
Yeah, I want to buy it already. You talk about brass zippers, like I'm in. So I get it.
There's
Abby, you were going to add something?
Yeah, there's just a lot of other product descriptions you could use there too. That brand in particular is very descriptive of each stitch, you could say. So that's what makes it cool to work for, though, because there's so much that you can pull from. Another piece of it too is like making sure that you have the entire group of your consideration audience. There's so many different ways to pull remarketing customers, or not remarketing customers, but retargeting audiences that a lot of users don't necessarily utilize. We see a lot of prospective clients not utilizing first party data, which is really incredibly super duper absolutely important in 2023 and is only going to become more important, but also using first-party data from a platform standpoint. So are you targeting people who like your page? Are you targeting people who like your ads but haven't purchased? Like that's, especially if you're struggling with audience size, that's a part of the mix that can't be ignored either, because you do need a certain size in order for the actual algorithm to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, there's definitely tons of Facebook pages that I like because it's beautiful product, but I've never actually bought, or I sign up for that email list, but I've never actually bought. And there could be very specific tailored messaging to me to figure out why I haven't bought and get me to make that decision.
Yeah.
So those are good examples of tweaks to audiences. One of our topics here is about tweaks to the product feed, Abby, and how that can make a big difference. So how do those tweaks differ and what kind of impact do those create?
Yeah, so tweaks to the audience, that is tweaks to who you are targeting, who you're showing the ads to. Tweaks to the product feed is more along the lines of tweaks to the ads, specifically for your dynamic ads, also basically known as shopping ads, if you want to get down to the brass tacks of it. These ads have titles that show what the product is. I'm sure we've all seen them on our Facebook feed, on our Google search feed. We've probably, most of us, or at least I have been persuaded to buy specifically from Facebook through these ads. And they're a really effective, more down funnel tool because users can see the products as they have seen them in the past. So if they clicked on it in a Facebook shop, a website, it'll follow them around a little bit as long as we're able to track it. But making sure the actual title of what it is saying the product is more important than a lot of people realize. So a lot of prospective clients, new clients that we come into, have really long product titles that have super descript colors. So like sea glass green or brown cinnamon orange. I don't know, these are not real colors, but that takes up a lot of characters when you're scrolling through a feed, which might not be what is going to entice someone to purchase. Might be something that they like when they're on the product page and going through and reading about the description. But what they need to know, is this a jacket or is this a shirt, right? That's something that could be a little confusing from just a photo. And also, it's important to know what kind of like material it is. Is it a cashmere sweater? Is that why it's $400 rather than $50? Just a lot of different areas that could be tested here. Another area specifically in Facebook we see is people and clients use their own name at the beginning of their product title, which is great in Google where you might be competing with a bunch of other brands and names in the search engine results page. But when it's Facebook, you're connected to that account. They can see your Facebook page right above it, so they know whose product it is. It might be just taking up useful real estate that could be used for those descriptions like cashmere or different other product descriptions. And generally, when we test it and we optimize product titles, it works every time. But there's a lot of different ways to do it, so we're always testing it. So I would encourage everyone else to just be testing it out. It's kind of fun to see what kind of small tweaks make an impact.
That Facebook one was so simple, but made such a big difference because, like Abby was saying, it says apparel company and co right there with the profile picture. And then there's 15 products and all you see is these 15 beautiful products. And underneath them, all it says is apparel company and co, apparel company and co, apparel company and co, when it could actually be describing the product rather than taking up 17 characters with something they already know.
Yeah. Another part of it too that is also a really simple kind of 5-minute tweak, but can really make a difference in performance, especially if you're on sale. Use those price slashing features in Facebook. If you're on an auto recommended setting, Facebook will sometimes use it, but there's not a guarantee they're going to do it every time. That's another just kind of simple way to get someone's attention a little bit more too. There's a lot of different options with those as well.
Those people like Jess that have followed you forever and haven't bought, but they're like, oh, but now it's on sale.
Yeah.
Maybe now's my time.
Exactly. It's a little different than what they're used to seeing in their feed. So that'll catch their eye. And then when they actually read what's going on, you can typically count on a click at least coming from it.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say, Abby, is basically don't set it and forget it when it comes to your feed, right? It's not one size fits all. And Jess, I know that's your mentality when it comes to overall management of platforms and how we report on things that are working. It's not just let's do it once a quarter and we'll be good, right? There's an importance to doing this on a more consistent basis. I'd love to hear your perspective on that. Why having weekly reporting meetings? Like, why is that important? What are we talking about? You telling me I need to spend my retainer hours on that, right? Like, come on, we can get away with not doing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, 25% of our retainers, I'll be totally honest, are spent on media management. And we make sure with our clients that that's very, very well communicated and they know exactly what is going into that time. But a lot of prospective clients come to us and they say, or they ask questions about scalability. they ask questions about, well, how are you going to be incentivized to keep growing our business? And for a while, we didn't understand that question of, what do you mean? We have a value of partnership. Like, we want your business to grow just as much as you want your business to grow. And somebody recently put it into a different context of, they've said, I've worked with a lot of agencies and there's all this growth in the beginning and then it plateaus. And that put it into perspective, because something that sets us apart is that we aren't a set it and forget it agency. And, we would encourage nobody to be a set it and forget it agency so that you don't experience that plateau. We are in the accounts every single day. We run weekly search term reports to make sure that nothing weird is getting in there. It's eye-opening to hear from new prospective clients and other people in the, digital advertising world, digital marketing world. But that is definitely something we live by, is set it and forget it is not in our vocabulary. And it hopefully isn't in too many other people's.
Yeah, you cannot afford to set it and forget it. I know that AI and automation is this it's been happening, obviously, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. But it's still really important to make sure that that's behaving how it's expected to. And there's still a lot of aspects that are not AI and are not automation. So make sure that everything's getting checked on, at least on a weekly basis, because God knows what you could be bidding on elsewhere. So
Yeah, to your point about the AI and all the things changing with algorithms, it's changing sometimes on a weekly basis, right? So if you are on that set and forget it and you're not looking at it except on a monthly or quarterly basis, you're going to look back and wish you would have done more changes to catch something that's a problem sooner, because you have to. It's so dynamic. You have to be dynamic right with it.
I mean, AI is not setting and forgetting it from its own algorithm. So we should not be doing it as a result either.
Yeah. And you can cut this part out, but even as an example, as Level, we do weekly search term reports for Level because you never know what's going to sneak into our own advertising. We had a search term that snuck in there for multi-level marketing. Yeah. Obviously, somebody searching for information on multi-level marketing organizations, even though it says Level and it says marketing, that's not something we're interested in. So it's super important to stay on top of that to make sure that we're not in searches that we don't want to be in. But that's not necessarily a negative keyword that we were going to come up on our own. That's not necessarily a negative keyword we were going to think of on our own. We have to check the report so that we can learn what people are actually searching so that we can negate it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to cut that out. Let's leave that in, right? Because that shows that we do for ourselves what we are advocating others to do, right? And that's a really good example. Keying off of a name, right? Like, people are always thinking of new ways to find products, and it's like Google says, "Oh, it's got Level." It might be you guys, right? And so it's important to stay on top of it, because it's going to change throughout the year, just like everybody's audiences changes throughout the year, which is my segue into the number 5 we had here, Abby, about how important it is to know your audience and how they're going to change throughout the year. It feels like you're pointing at some seasonality here, the different buying seasons and how people behave in winter versus summer. But where else are you going with this? What is the importance of knowing that about your audience?
Yeah. So number 1, knowing your audience is step 1 in general, just a general audience persona, but also know that audience persona can, and it probably will change throughout the year, and can change, throughout the years, plural, into, maybe your ideal customer looks a little bit different. But let's talk on the short term a little bit. Think about, the buying cycle of, men's apparel, for example. You're typically probably going to be targeting some men. However, gift giving season, say Christmas time, holidays, you might want to think about targeting and expanding that option to women as well, because they're buying gifts. Other people are buying gifts as well.
My wife buys all my clothes, Abby. She buys all my clothes. I don't buy anything for myself. So you're 100% there. Absolutely.
Exactly. And that's why it's just so important to let your data help drive your decisions as well, and especially your decisions on your audience, because the media landscape is changing day by day. The platforms are changing day by day, but so is your audience. And that's a piece that I feel like often gets ignored. You know, we know our audience, they're blank, 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 and that's not going to change. You might be missing a little bit of an attribute there that can really only be found with further testing. There's also like tiers to your audiences too that you can think about. You know, not every single person is going to be a high value top purchaser who buys once a month and has a $300 average order value. It's great to have as many of those as you can, but that's not going to be your entire customer for most brands. It's also important to think about the user who, you know, you might not want to target all the time, but you might want to target when something's really on sale. And we do use a couple of tools right now to kind of segment those website users and those customers so that we're only targeting them when things are on sale and we know they're more willing to buy. That's worked really well so far. So the seasonality there of knowing your sales cycle and knowing when to target certain aspects of your audience in that sales cycle is getting a little nitty gritty, but it's really what makes me love this job, because it's so granular and it's so specific, but it makes a big difference when you add it all up.
We tell people all the time when they're first meeting with us, like, be careful with your questions, because if you want to get nerdy, we'll get nerdy very quickly. So that's always the caveat.
Well, I appreciate you both getting nerdy with me here in the podcast. I enjoy listening to you guys geek out about this stuff. It definitely comes through that you're passionate, for sure. So quickly to recap for our audience, who I know very dearly. Thank you, everybody that listens to this. Today, we talked about these top 5 things that we see as important because our clients are seeing them as important in e-commerce. And it's also what we're testing into and seeing, you know, really great results around. And so we covered the importance of being nimble in our ever-changing e-com platform landscape and testing into new platforms, and also testing the viability of things like PMax and other tools like Criteo and TikTok. A consideration stage, audience segmentation, and why it's important not to lump everybody into one and get really specific about people that perhaps haven't bought yet but are considering it, and not treating them like everybody else, and ways that we could do that to be more effective with our marketing. Some tweaks that we can make to product feeds to be more effective with our marketing as well, and how, while we love the sound of our own name as business people, right, you don't necessarily need to have that name in every single product on your feed. You're taking up valuable real estate. And that was a great tip that was shared. And then the importance of daily management and weekly reporting. You know, set and forget it, and you're going to regret it. Put that on a t-shirt, we'll sell that. But that was the key takeaway. And then really know your audience and how it changes throughout the year, because your marketing needs to change with your audience and meet them with where they are, and meet them where they are to be successful. So thank you again to Abby and Jess for putting up with all my punny segues and dropping the knowledge in the podcast today. We're definitely going to go more in depth into all of these topics with members of the e-commerce team, because there's plenty to talk about here. So tune in for more episodes of Test, Learn, Grow in the coming weeks. And thanks for listening.